Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's a little after 6:10, so we'd like to get started in respect for your time. Thank you for joining the San Antonio River Authority and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers this evening. My name is Brian Mast. I'm the Deputy Director of Government Affairs for the San Antonio River Authority. I've been with the River Authority a little over 15 years, and it's really great to see a lot of familiar faces in the room this evening. Thank you very much for being here. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be posted on project websites in the coming week. We have a number of Spanish translators available this evening. If anyone prefers or requires Spanish speaking, please let us know.
Buenas tardes. Si necesitas traducción o asistencia en español, por favor busca a los representantes que tienen este pin verde antes de la presentación o durante. Gracias.
All right. Well, thank you. We are here this evening to discuss the River Road Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Project. We want to share information about the project to provide some common understanding of what the project may or may not do within the project area. Before we get into the presentation, I would like to recognize a couple guests we have with us this evening and invite them to come up and welcome you. Precinct 2 Commissioner, Mr. Justin Rodriguez.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. Listen, first of all, good evening. Thank you for being here. It's great to see that we filled the room with active residents. I'm County Commissioner Justin Rodriguez. I represent the River Road neighborhood. So great to see a lot of familiar faces. In fact, I'm going to shout out to Barbara because Barbara was the one that was calling me and saying, let's get a meeting. So Barbara, cheers, congratulations to you. But I know she was advocating on behalf of many of those who are here in the room. First of all, to set a little bit of the stage, this is a federal ecosystem restoration project. The Army Corps of Engineers out of Washington is 100% in charge of this project. Obviously, the local sponsor is the San Antonio River Authority. Let me also thank Brian, Derek, and the rest of the team from the River Authority for helping put this meeting together, because getting information, number one, to the community is vital, but even more important than that is getting input from and listening to the residents in River Road and those that are going to be impacted by this project. So Barbara and others were very insistent on, let's have a meeting. I know I was going back and forth with the River Authority trying to get this coordinated because we don't want to waste anybody's time, and we want to make sure the information that is relayed is substantive. Early on, there was not really a lot of information to share, but they are now entering into the design phase of this restoration project. I understand, and you'll get more information tonight, that it could be up to an 18-month design phase that we're ensuing now. And so you won't really see any dirt moving from that perspective for, again, another 18 months or so at the minimum. But the design phase is the important part to make sure that we're getting input from neighbors, how you're going to be impacted. And so we were, from the county's perspective, even though it's not a county project, I wanted to make sure that as my constituents, you got a voice in this matter and that you were well informed. So that's why we helped put this together, also with the Councilwoman, District 1, who you're going to hear from in a minute, Dr. Kerr. But again, I just wanted to come by, welcome everybody. I also want to give a quick shout out. We never expect trouble at these meetings, never. But for your own safety, there are a couple Bexar County Sheriff's deputies who are here. And you know, it may be that I may need to be escorted out of here. I don't know. No, but I just want to thank them for their service. They're in the back. If you guys can just wave, and let's give them a round of applause for their service. Thank you guys for being here, doing a lot of great work in the community. But again, I simply wanted to come by, make sure you knew how to, first of all, reach us. If you don't know how to reach me, I'll give you my cell phone number. If you want to take it down, I can leave it behind. It's 210-718-1379, 210-718-1379. My email is very simple. It's JROD, so JROD at bear.org. So if I do have another meeting to get to, so if I'm not here and don't get all of your questions answered, please call me, email me. We are here to help facilitate, number one, responses to your questions, but also we want to make sure that what is done here is in the best interest of the neighbors and the river. That's what is, I think, key to getting this done. So thank you very much for being here and being engaged, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you. I think I'm passing it back to Brian. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. Now I'd like to introduce District 1, City of San Antonio Councilwoman, Dr. Suk Kaur.
Good evening. It's so nice to see so many of you, and I appreciate all of the feedback. And if you'd love to set up a meeting with the office, we'd love to meet with you all. We're happy to be here in support of Sarah. And as y'all know, when we did another one of the meetings here, I'd like to see or actually know who's in the crowd. So we're going to start from District 10 and go down. So if you're in District 10 in here tonight, will you just raise your hand? Great. Thank you all for coming down here. 9. Great. 8. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, for all my District 1 residents, I want to know what neighborhoods. So we're going to start further out. If we have anybody in the northern part of District 1, so Greater Harmony Hills, Colonial Hills, Delview, Share Hills, Ridgeview. If you're from the northern part of District 1, raise your hand, okay? Great. What about the west part, Los Angeles Heights? All right, and great, yep. And then what about the central, Beacon Hill, Monte Vista? Okay, we're gonna go south, King William, Lavaca, and Tobin Hill? Okay, River Road. I love it. What did I miss? Did I miss anybody in District 1 that I didn't call out, Quarry area? Great. Okay. Well, it's nice to see all of y'all. I just wanted to start off with one more thing. Just turn around. I know a lot of you all know each other. You're probably sitting around family. But I just thought we could ground ourselves in one thing that we love about the river that you all get to experience. I know so many, especially of the folks that live around it every day, have a different experience with it. The other day I was doing a tour and I saw families fishing in the river, and it was really beautiful to see that experience that I had never experienced. And so that was something that was really nice to see. So I'm going to give you all just 30 seconds to turn to the person next to you and just say one thing that you love about this river that is either something you want to make sure that stays forever, regardless of what ecosystem preservation change, or just one thing that you want to share with the person next to you about what the river means to you. All right, take 30 seconds to do that. All right, we'll come back in 3, 2, 1. Before I hand it over to the Sarah folks, does anybody want to share just one positive thing that one or two people want to share out? Not required, just want to give the opportunity. Okay, well, I'll let you all wait for the presentation then. Thank you all for coming here. Community engagement is a really important part of what Sarah is doing with this work and what we believe in. So thank you all for joining, and I'm going to pass it back over to Brian.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. So at the welcome table this evening, we had comment cards and question cards. I hope you picked up as many as you needed. We'd like you to fill those out. Staff are here. We have about 15 to 20 SARA staff. We will collect those cards and we will ask those questions at the end of the presentation. We'll try to get through as many as we can. What we don't get through will be posted on the website, just like the ones that we do get through. But that's how we're going to hold question and answers at the end of the meeting. In addition, like I said before, the recording of the meeting will be posted on the project websites as well. As many of you know, a feasibility was conducted between 2018 and 2020 to determine what, if anything, could be accomplished for ecosystem restoration along the River Road neighborhood area. While there were formal and informal meetings during that process, the final meeting in November of 2020 was fully virtual because of the pandemic. It was not the way we intended to end the feasibility study, but that's how it had to conclude. We're pleased to see so many people still interested in the project. We acknowledge between 2020 and today, there have not been additional public meetings, but there's been very little to report out to the community. In 2023, based on the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed in 2021, the current administration identified and allocated full project funding for the River Road Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Project. Normally, with a Corps of Engineers project, a cost share is required. Typically, it's a 65% federal cost and a 35% local cost. Presently, with this project, it is 100% federally funded project based on the current administration. We thank the current administration for their faith in the project and their interest in moving this project forward. In February of this year, 2024, the Corps of Engineers held a technical design kickoff where the technical consultant team was introduced to the staff of the River Authority, City of San Antonio, Bexar County, Brackenridge Park Conservancy, the Brackenridge Golf Course, and the River Road Neighborhood Association. I've participated in several of these kickoff meetings in the past for other projects, and this is the first one where a neighborhood association has been invited in to a technical kickoff. I want to acknowledge that the Corps of Engineers stepped out and allowed for that to occur. We thank them for allowing the community to be engaged in the project. So without further delay, we'd like to get to the presentation. I will introduce all three presenters just to let you know who they will be, and then we'll get started. Kathleen Rubin is the Creeks and Trails Program Manager with the San Antonio River Authority, and she will begin this presentation. Danny Allen is a wildlife biologist and environmental resources lead for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He'll have the middle segment. And Chris Davies is the Cultural Resources Manager, Tribal Liaison for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and he will conclude the presentation. And with that, I'd like to welcome Kathleen Rubin.
Hello, everyone. So like Brian mentioned, my name is Kathleen Rubin, and I'm the Creeks and Trails Program Manager at the San Antonio River Authority. We've already covered the agenda, some of the items on there a little bit. We've had our welcomes from our elected officials. I'll start the project presentation and hand it over to my U.S. Army Corps of Engineers colleagues, and then we will have our Q&A session. So like Brian mentioned, please complete those question cards throughout the presentation, and then staff members will collect those so that we can get through all of those answers that we have time for today. Then we also have some dedicated time at the end of the presentation where we will be at the various breakout stations so that you can come up and meet the members of the project team and ask additional questions. So let's begin. First, I'd like to reiterate the project that we're here to talk about today. This is the River Road Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Project. It's going to leverage full federal funding that was made available through the current administration's initiatives pilot, which is funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the goal is to implement channel restoration activities, improve fish passage, and mitigate erosion. And you can see the study area on the map shown on the screen. I also want to speak to how you can stay involved as this project progresses. So this will not be the last opportunity for you to stay engaged with the work that we're doing on the River Road Ecosystem Restoration Project. There will be engagement opportunities at each design phase at 30, 60, and 90%, and I'll speak to the timing of those milestones when I get to my timeline slide. Notifications for those events will be made via mail and on social media. We will also have a project website. We currently have a project website that includes information about the project and all of the past presentations that have been held related to the project. That is where we will post the frequently asked questions document, which will include the questions that you document today and answers to those questions so that you can revisit them, along with the slides that we're presenting today and the recording that's being made of this event. You can also reach out directly to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the River Road ER at usace.army.mil email, and I believe that email address is also included on the fact sheet that you collected at the sign-in table. I'd also like to acknowledge that there are many partners and stakeholders who have been involved in this project since its inception, many of whom I see in the room today. Of course, the San Antonio River Authority, we are the non-federal sponsor for this project. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is the federal agency. And then we have stakeholders, many of whom are here: Bexar County, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ, the City of San Antonio Parks, Public Works, and Office of Historic Preservation Departments, the River Road Neighborhood Association, Centro San Antonio, the Texas Forest Service, Tribal Nations, Brackenridge Park Conservancy, Brackenridge Park Stakeholder Advisory Committee, Brackenridge Golf Course, and many others. Make sure I get all my notes in front of me. I want to speak in a bit more detail about the River Authority's role in this project. As the non-federal sponsor, the River Authority is responsible for real estate, property interests, and relocations if those are needed. We're committed to operations and maintenance of this project, including implementation of an adaptive management plan, which I will speak to a little bit later in the presentation. The River Authority is also committed to timely and transparent project communication. The River Authority's goal for this project is to restore the aquatic and riparian ecosystem of the San Antonio River by restoring stream function and habitat. As Brian alluded to before, this area of the river has been of interest to the public for a long time before there was federal funding available for this project that we're discussing today. So I'd like to cover some of that historic timeline. From a 10-year period, 1998 to 2008, the San Antonio River Oversight Committee met to make recommendations for the San Antonio River improvement projects. One of the recommendations that community-driven process determined was to make a connection between the Mission Reach to the Brackenridge Park Trail. So that was the first time this was illustrated as a potential project. Several years later, in 2015, there was a federal interest determination where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers determined that there was federal interest in the project for this section of the river. It wasn't until 2018 that a feasibility study was started, which evaluated and studied the potential improvements that could be made along this stretch of river. And this study recommended a plan to restore the health and function of this section of the river. And that plan was, like Brian mentioned, presented to the public in November of 2020. In 2023, federal funding was secured through the bipartisan infrastructure law through the current administration's initiatives pilot. And once that funding was secured, the Corps contracted a technical consultant for the aquatic ecosystem restoration design. So that brings us to where we are today as we enter design phase, which will occur from 2024 through 2025. The project will be bid in 2026, and then construction is anticipated from 2026 through 2028. From there, we will enter the adaptive management phase, which as the non-federal sponsor is the River Authority as the, operations and maintenance entity, we will begin to work on the restoration of native species. The adaptive management plan allows us the flexibility to determine how successful those native plants are in being established, and then adjusting as needed to ensure that the plantings are established, and that as new information becomes available, we adjust to it. I want to dive in a little bit deeper on when you can anticipate to hear from us again during the design phase. We will have 30% design anticipated this summer, 2024. 60% design is anticipated in the winter of 2025. And then later that year in the spring, we'll come back with 90% design. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Danny Allen from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to walk through some more technical details about the project.
Thank you. My name is Danny Allen. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm a wildlife biologist in our Regional Planning and Environmental Center, and I will be talking to you about the restoration. The Corps of Engineers, our vision is engineering solutions for the nation's toughest challenges. We deliver that mission throughout the country and overseas. This project is in the Southwest Division, and the Fort Worth District covers the San Antonio area and is responsible for this project. So, looking at the River Road project, we've got some problems to address. If you think about it, it's obvious that the river's function is to get water from one place to another. What's almost as important is what the water's carrying. And so the river will pick up sediments as it moves along the path, and as long as it has enough energy to carry those sediments, it'll keep those suspended in the water column. Once it hits slower moving water or area of lower energy, it'll drop those sediments, creating sandbars and the like. And so what we've got here in the River Road is this compounding situation where we've got the river water is picking up sediments, and as it approaches the low water crossing, it drops out those sediments, builds up sandbars, and keeps backing up those pool areas further and further back. Those sandbars cause the river to split and to erode into other areas, and it just compounds that problem. It starts the process all over again. And we're getting into the point where some of that erosion is impeding upon sections of the River Road. So our main problems that we're trying to solve with this ecosystem restoration project deals with the stream degradation due to that excessive erosion, as well as that excessive sedimentation, and trying to restore that sediment transport balance, where erosion is good as long as it's within the balance of that sedimentation. And so to have that healthy stream, we've got to balance those out. The riparian habitat is also constrained. Avenue A on the east side of the River Road segment of the project is taking up space where we could increase that riparian habitat. When I'm talking about riparian habitat, I'm talking about streamside habitat that's very important for filtration of pollutants, and providing habitat and shade and organic input into the river. And so the wider we can have these riparian areas, the better it is for the health of the river. And so we want to restore that habitat where it's constrained and degraded. So the objectives that we have for our project are to restore that aquatic ecosystem structure and function of the river, to restore that sediment balance transport system. We want to restore and maintain riparian habitat, and we want to reduce that erosive threat to the river road that parallels the river. So how do we do that? We've got several ecosystem restoration measures incorporated to do that. The first is the removal of low water crossings, 3 different low water crossings. I've got a map after this where it'll exhibit the location of those. The installation of in-stream structures to help with the sediment transport balance of the system. And I've got a photograph of that coming up as well, and I'll talk about that. The construction of bridges at the low water crossing sites to maintain the neighborhood connectivity, the removal of Avenue A, the construction of a trail on the Avenue A side of the project area, the removal of non-native invasive species, and the planting of native species in the park where we're removing those invasive species, as well as filling in some gaps if there are any gaps, such as where Avenue A is presently. We'll be going in with plantings on that site as well. So this is a map of the project area, the LWC1, LWC2, LWC3. Those are the 3 low water crossings that we'll be replacing with bridges. And this is an example of some of the excessive erosion on the the west bank of the River Road section of the San Antonio River. The figure on the left shows the high bank that's being excessively eroded. And the top figure on the right is those lower energy areas where those sediments are being deposited. And the figure on the lower right is an example of some of those in-stream structures. Those in-stream structures are designed to carry the energy of the river back into itself instead of to the banks, so that we eliminate the erosion on those outer cut banks, and we focus that energy of the river back towards in on itself to help absorb some of that energy. So these are some of the current locations showing some of the endangered or invasive species that we have in the system. We've got giant cane, we've got elephant ear, chinaberry, ligustrum, and other invasive species. And we'll be replacing that with vegetation that'll benefit wildlife and avian habitat. And this is showing again the erosion on the bank of the river. On the photograph on the left shows some of that erosion, exposing some of that root walls and root wads on the side of the bank. On the picture on the right is areas that are being compacted due to uncontrolled access to the river, where foot traffic is denuded any of the vegetation that's on the side of the river there. So what are the ecological benefits of the restoration? The low water crossing removal and the in-stream structures, again, balance that sediment transport. It also creates these pool, riffle, run habitats within the stream. It increases the diversity of the stream's ecosystem because of that, and we get an increased diversity of fish and aquatic invertebrates that lack either those riffle structures or they lack the pool habitats. So you get an increased and aquatic biodiversity with the installation of those resources. We balance out that sediment transport so we're not getting that excessive erosion or that excessive sedimentation in the system, so it maintains those pool, riffle, run habitats. The removal of Avenue A, we widen out that riparian width by planting native riparian trees and woody vegetation along the eastern bank of the river, and planting of native riparian trees in the areas where we're removing those invasive species. And then there's a recreation component to this ecosystem restoration as well. Avenue A will be replaced with a trail set back from the river Bridges will be constructed at the low water crossing removal sites to provide that neighborhood connectivity. There will be fishing access points, bird blinds, and access controls so that we're not trampling the entire eastern bank of the river, but we can focus points on fishing accessible areas and birding areas along the banks of the river. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Davies, who is the cultural resources person for this project.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Davies. I am the Cultural Resources Manager for the Regional Planning Environmental Center, which is a really long way of saying I'm the archaeologist on this project. So, we wanted to talk to you about this evening about the cultural resources process that you will see us undergoing in this project. And the important thing to understand is the number one law that is driving the cultural resources investigation for this project is the National Historic Preservation Act. And whenever there is money that the government is going to do or build a project or authorize a project, we have to address the National Historic Preservation Act and follow the process in there. The process is outlined in something called the Section 106 of the Act. So it's called the Section 106 process of dealing with the cultural resources. What I want you to understand is that we're still relatively at the beginning of this process. This slide is directly from the Advisory Council of Historic Places. That's a federal agency that oversees the National Historic Preservation Act. This is from their website. We are on the section you see highlighted in red to identify historic properties. So what that means is we are about to begin a cultural resources survey of this project. But the important part to realize, this is a process, and on the right-hand side you can see consultation throughout, and that's part of what we're doing here this evening. And as the process goes on, you initiate the process, you identify the historic properties, which is what we're doing now. We will determine if those, I'm not going to read every single word on here, so you can read it. We will determine if those sites are considered eligible for the National Register of Historic Places or not. And if they are, will the project impact them or not? And if it will impact them, how do we deal with the archaeological or the architectural, the cultural resources that are out there? Do we avoid them? Do we minimize the impact, or do we somehow mitigate them? That's the resolve adverse at the very bottom. And then, of course, we hit proceed. The important part of this is a process that we have to go through on all of our projects, and we are relatively at the beginning of this process. Fieldwork for the cultural resources is scheduled to begin in the next few months. You will, the field crew that we are contracting with will be conducting a shovel testing on a grid. It's a very small hole that you will see. People, you'll get a better picture of it here in a second. That will, folks will excavate. They're about 1 foot in diameter. And, foot in diameter, and a foot or two, well, here it's going to be much deeper than that, until they reach no cultural resources. You will see some backhoe testing or trenching out there. Realize that this is not someone putting in a pipe. No one's putting any utility lines. Backhoe trenching is an scientific archaeological method. There will be 2 archaeological monitors, professionals, on each side of that trench when it's being done. And the reason it is done is it gives us a good idea of how that landform was created over time, how the river or whatever deposited those sediments. Once we have a good idea of that, that gives us a better idea of how the archaeological site was formed over time, and that lets us understand that archaeological site and how it was formed. The other thing you will be seeing is an architectural and engineering survey that will be going on in the project area and surrounding it. It will inventory and evaluate all, building structures or objects in the project area and surrounding the project area. Just to give you a better idea of what this is, you'll see folks out there shovel testing. On the left-hand side is a shovel test that is not from San Antonio area. I apologize. That is from coastal Texas. But it does do a really good job of kind of popping out that layer of that white there. That is oyster shell that was collected by humans, and it was put over to the side. It's what we call a trash dump or a midden. But it really pops out at you. And so this is the kind of thing that archaeologists are looking for. You can see that it's approximately a foot in diameter and so far in depth. And you'll see folks like you see on the right-hand side out surveying with those shovel tests on a grid. Given the public nature of this project, those folks will be wearing safety gear and things of that nature. So you'll see them in yellow vests and something to make them more visible and safe. Again, tobacco trenching, I just want you to be aware when you look out your car window or when you're walking your dog or your family and you see someone out there and you're like, wait, are they starting the project yet? No, no one's starting the project yet. We're just conducting our scientific analysis. There'll be half a dozen or so of these throughout the project area. And lastly, this picture is from San Antonio. This is from another project, West Side Creeks. So we will inventory and evaluate all the structures or buildings in the project area, but also in the indirect area of potential effect. That we call that an APE or area of potential effect to a little bit different than the project area because it's bigger. This is anything that could be impacted by the project, so access roads, things like that, places you might store materials, but also the structures that are around it. And that includes the neighborhoods that are around it. So you will see people walking through your neighborhoods or around the surrounding area, inventorying the structures. They will be doing it from the public right-of-way. In other words, they will be in the streets or on the sidewalks. No one's walking in your yard. No one's knocking on your door. So just realize there'll people be out there. They'll have information sheets on them. If someone comes up to them and says, hey, what are you doing? They'll say, call Chris Davies. He's got this really long title, but he's just the archaeologist on this project. So where does that leave us? Where are our next steps? Because that's usually the next question. Hey, where do we go from here? Because you're just doing an inventory, Chris. You're just looking to see what's out there. That's right. That's all we're doing right now. We're just looking to see what's out there. We know that there's stuff out there, quite frankly. There is, and we need a good archaeological survey of this project area before we can proceed. So we have contracted with a professional archaeological and cultural resources firm to conduct the field work. They are from Texas. They will draft a report with the recommendations and submit to us, and I will review it, or someone on my team. We will have the contractor make edits, most likely. We usually do. And then we will submit that report to the Texas Historic Preservation Officer, also known as the Texas Historical Commission, and other stakeholders as well that you saw. Kathleen list many of those earlier. The contractor will then make edits if necessary, and depending on those findings, we might even proceed to archaeological testing. In other words, if we find a site that we believe might be eligible for the National Register, but we're not sure, we might proceed to testing. Brian, are you?
Well, Thank you. We have River Authority staff collecting questions right now. I want to say I was remiss in introducing a couple people earlier this evening. I would like to introduce River Authority Board Member Lourdes Galvan, who represents District 2 for the San Antonio River Authority. And Bexar County at Large, Miss Patrice Melanson. She was here earlier. Yep, back here. Thank you. I'd also like to introduce our General Manager, Mr. Derek Bays, in the back left over here. My back left. And we will have staff member ask these questions here just momentarily. Do you guys want to come up here I don't know which will be asked first.
Thank you. Yeah, if we can get our team back up to the podium. I do have our first question. What is an invasive species and how do you determine that it is invasive? And then how do you know which plants are native to plants on the project?
So an invasive species is a non-native species. It's not native to Texas, or certain, most of them aren't native to North America. They're from overseas, and they tend to outcompete our native species. They have no host predators because their host predators are overseas where they originated. And a lot of times they're able to outcompete native species just because they're able to, a lot of them have the ability to grow in conditions that native species might find a little bit more challenging. And once they establish themselves, they're good at, a lot of these species will have, they release chemicals into the soil that prohibit other species from growing, and then they spread. They provide, and then the native species, we can identify, we've got botanists and biologists out there to identify these plants, to know which ones they are. And so the idea is to go in there and treat those invasive species and make room for the native species.
Danny, will the project have any impact on flooding or the 100-year floodplain?
No. Brian, you want that?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
Danny's short answer, no, is correct. The answer is no. The project is not allowed to increase flood surface elevation. It is the grounding principle working with the Army Corps of Engineers. The project will not increase the flood surface elevation in this area.
What steps are you taking to preserve native trees in the area?
So the native trees in the area will not, the only time we'll remove anything native in the area is for construction access. The trees have all been tagged. They'll be on the engineering drawings. So the contractor that'll come in will know which trees are native and which trees are non-native and invasive.
I also want to say that the River Authority and Danny have gone out with a member of the community and identified 32 trees that he and his students planted in the area that are native species that the city of San Antonio donated to the community. We've gone out twice and identified those. And so we are taking this very seriously. We are not looking to harm any of the native tree species out there.
We have several questions about ADA accessibility for whenever the project is finished.
Yes, so like with any recreation features, trail, or access to and from this site, including our bridges, ADA access will be a consideration of the design process, and it's a requirement of the project.
Will the clarity of the river water improve with this project? What's the impact on water quality?
I will caveat this with saying I'm a government affairs person and not environmental sciences. But we have seen on the mission reach of the San Antonio River, where we have gone in and planted native plant species, grasses, wildflowers, trees, shrubs, that we have improved the water quality along the mission reach. And we're going to see that here as well. There are severely compacted areas on the east side of the river from where vehicles pull up immediately, almost touching the river. And those areas will be planted with native grasses, shrubs, wildflowers, and there will be filtration possibilities that will improve the clarity of the water in this area.
Okay, I have a question that says, how do you see the East Bank erosion being handled, concrete or natural?
No, the East Bank erosion will be completely natural. We'll be planting native grasses, forbs, wildflowers, shrubs, and trees to stabilize to the bank. The bald cypress or the Montezuma cypress that are planted out there do an extremely good job of holding those banks from erosion, and we would be using all natural processes for that.
We also have several questions regarding parking.
We are looking at creating a small parking lot on the north side of Mulberry that would provide access where people would be able to cross Mulberry into the hike and bike trail that is presently Avenue A. There will not be parking on that hike and bike trail. Obviously, it is meant for pedestrians and bikes.
Next question is, what steps will be taken to protect birds and other wildlife throughout the process?
Yes, there'll be short-term impacts. We working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Migratory Bird Treaty Office. We're following their procedures for construction in an area. The removal of vegetation is limited to the invasive species, except for the case of construction access. And in that place, there'll be either bird monitors at those times, or if it's outside of the breeding season, it will be the optimal time to do some of the vegetation clearing. But a lot of that native vegetation that we'll be planting will increase that habitat value for birds as well. So there'll be a temporary decrease in habitat, minor decrease in habitat based off of the invasive species removal and the construction access. But in the long term, it'll be a lot higher quality habitat.
Our experience here locally with the mission reach, we probably had about 40 to 50 avian species using the mission reach or the San Antonio River when it was channelized. And it's probably primarily waterfowl around the Davis Lake area. We have documented over the time 220 different species of birds utilizing the Mission Reach project. By utilizing, I mean nesting, breeding, feeding, not just flying over, actually using the San Antonio River as good ecosystem, good habitat for them. It's pretty amazing what we have in our community in this regard. It is at Mitchell Lake. It is here along the Mission Reach. I know it's along Avenue B and Avenue A, and we aim to improve that habitat.
Okay, next question is, will any private property be acquired or taken as part of this project?
My flyby answer is no. It is confined to what you see. There is no private property being considered for this project.
Next question is, When you're planting new vegetation, will it be landscaped or naturally planted?
Yeah, the native plants that'll be put back in will be naturally planted like it was part of a woodland or whatever. So we'll go in, the only thing that you might see is around those initial tree plantings, there might be cages around those trees initially to keep predation from the rabbits and other herbivores away from it. But other than that, they will be allowed to grow naturally within the system.
And just to add on to that point, once we begin implementing the adaptive management plan, we'll be revisiting how successful those native species are in establishment and make adjustments accordingly so that there's a truly natural and native habitat over the long term.
Okay, could you speak more about the design and function of the proposed in-stream structures? How will they impact the functioning of this segment of the river?
So the in-stream structures are meant to dissipate and guide energy to areas where it doesn't cause significant erosion or significant sedimentation. And it also is designed to create the pools and the riffles and the runs of the stream that we're looking to incorporate and develop as far as that ecosystem restoration process. If you can think about it, if you've got a row of rocks and the water hits that row of rocks, it's going to divert that water to a certain point. A lot of these are more than likely, we don't have the design of some of these in-stream structures yet, but the design will be natural features such as stone, maybe wood, and other natural materials for those. Yeah.
Next question I have is, throughout this project, will fishing be available and other recreational features when this project has been completed?
Upon completion, absolutely, fishing will be available. During construction, absolutely not. I heard the question two different ways, but upon completion, fishing as it is today will be accessible.
Who is the design consultant chosen, if there is one already? And who's responsible for contracting?
The design company for this project is MMSM, Hewitt Zollers. It's a joint venture, and they have Michael Baker assisting them as their partner in the natural channel design.
I'd like to note that Hewitt Zollers and Michael Baker International are also working on the Westside Creek's ecosystem restoration project at this time as well. Michael Baker is known for their stream restoration, their natural channel design restoration across the country. So we feel very comfortable with the design firms that we have on board. Contracting for construction will be later on the timeline. You saw it in 2026. That will be a process. The Corps of Engineers is very interested in trying to get a local contractor to do the work during construction. But that will be later on in 2026.
Another question is, will you be using locally sourced plant material and native plants?
Yes, we want to use locally sourced plants just because of they're adapted to the region already. They have a higher survival rate. So we'll be looking to use locally sourced plant material.
Respectfully, the question that was answered twice. Can some of the tougher questions be answered since we are here, wouldn't
We-
you like to answer some of these tougher questions?
We will answer the questions that we have available to us, and we will also be having a breakout session where you can come ask questions of the team in just about 3 minutes. We're going to end this.
Controlled and only the nice questions are being answered, and this is televised, and
Thank
that's
you.
not fair.
All the questions will be answered online if they're not being answered here this evening. Thank you.
Of your question here. A series of questions, so combining details from all of them. How can migratory bird habitats and native birds, will the migratory habitats be restored and the native birds retain their habitats in the area?
When beside them, they're running them away. How
Yeah,
can
this-
how can you restore the migratory situation when right down,
Thank you.
Yeah.
they're being run away? How are you gonna?
There'll be temporary impacts to the migratory birds and native birds during construction. They just, I mean, that's just the nature of constructing ecosystem restoration. But the habitat that is created for them will be a higher quality habitat and support more birds, both egrets and, songbirds and waterfowl.
This is a completely separate project from the 2017 bond project. It has nothing to do with the same project. Thank you.
All right, our last question here. This project is a part of the Corps of Engineers Fish Passage Program. What will this actually do to help the fish population in the area?
Yeah, currently the low water crossing is a barrier to fish passage. So fish aren't able to migrate up the stream past the low water crossings. And so not only will this eliminate that barrier to fish passage, but it'll create that pool riffle run habitats that encourage migration of fish up and down the river as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to conclude the question and answers right there. We are going to be available in the back for anybody that would like to speak with the project team here today. At 30% late summer this year, there will be more information. There is no design to be able to be shown this evening, as we're at the very beginning. So we do look forward to coming back to the community, probably utilize this as a nice resource to be able to have such a large group. We appreciate you coming out tonight. Thank you very much.